We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 12a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah brought the opinion of Ben Beseira that if a person brings a Karban Pesach on the morning of the 14th, Shelo Lishmo, Ben Beseira says it's going to be disqualified, and the idea is that is considered enough of the Zman of the Karban Pesach that it's like you're bringing it Bizmano Shelo Lishmo, and therefore it is disqualified. And on the previous Amud, Reb Oshia said that Ben Beseira would say also that if you bring the Karban Pesach Lishmo on the morning of the 14th, that it would actually be kosher, because that is completely the Zman of the Karban Pesach, according to Ben Beseira. That's Reb Oshia's understanding of Ben Beseira. And the Gemara in the previous Amud asked, doesn't it say Bein Harbayim by the Karban Pesach? That means the afternoon of the 14th. How can you say that the morning of the 14th is the time of the bringing of the Karban Pesach? And the Gemara said, no, really Bein Harbayim just means between the two evenings, meaning to say again between the evening of the 14th and the evening of the 15th, and it really means the whole day of the 14th of Nisan. That's actually what Bein Harbayim means. And the Gemara asked from various other times where we see Bein Harbayim, and the Gemara now is in the middle of asking from Ketores. It says the Ketores, the incense in the Beis HaMikdash, was brought Bein Harbayim. So you're going to say that's also the whole day? And the Gemara now answers it's different by the Ketores, the Iskish Leneros, because that's compared to the Neros, the candles of the menorah, where also we already said in the previous Amud that it says it's Bo'erev, it's in the evening, and so therefore it's clear that it does not mean the entire day that you light the Neros. Rashi explains the Iskish Leneros, that the Ketores is compared to the Neros, the candles of the menorah. It says in the pasuk, Uvahalos Arnas HaNeros Bein Harbayim Yakti Rena. It talks there about the Ketores, and it talks about the Neros. Vahainu Bein Harbayim the Ketores, and that's actually the Bein Harbayim of the Ketores, and it's compared to the Neros, so we understand that the Bein Harbayim of the Ketores really does mean towards the evening. And the Gemara continues, Hasam Nami over there also, Ksiv, it's written in the pasuk, Sham Tizbach Es HaPesach Bo'erev. Doesn't it say that you're going to slaughter the Karban Pesach Bo'erev? And so we really do have a source that it means the evening. So how can you say that over there by Karban Pesach it means all day? You have a second source of Bo'erev that seems to indicate that it also means the afternoon, it means in the evening. And the Gemara continues and answers, Ahu Ye'ucher Davar Hu Diyasa. That pasuk is teaching us Ye'ucher Davar. Rashi explains, Ye'ucher Davar means Ye'ucher Pesach L'Tamid. What it means is if you're going to bring the Karban Pesach and it's the time already for the Karban Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim, the Tamid should go first. The Afagav the Kula Yom Zimne, even though the entire day, really, according to Ben Beseira, is the time to bring the Karban Pesach. But Ishaya ad Zman Shchitas HaTamid. But if you delay the bringing of the Karban Pesach till the time of the slaughtering of the Karban Tamid, so Tamid Kodem Lo, so the Karban Tamid comes first. That's what it means when it says Bo'erev. It means Ye'uchar Davar, means to say it should come after the Tamid Bein Harbayim. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Ye'ucher Davar shenemar bo Bo'erev uvein harbayim l'davar shelo nemar bo ela bein harbayim belvad. When it says Bo'erev and bein harbayim by Karban Pesach, so it's Ye'ucher Davar. That should come later on something which says Bo'erev and bein harbayim, meaning the Karban Pesach should come later than something, the Karban Tamid, where it only says bein harbayim. We learn again from the fact that it says both Bo'erev and bein harbayim by Karban Pesach, that comes after the Tamid shel bein harbayim. But the Gemara continues and asks, but is there such a thing where if you would slaughter in the morning the Karban Pesach, we would say that's the proper time? And when the Bein Harbayim comes, when the afternoon comes, Amrit Yochar Davar, then we say that it should be even later than the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim. Then suddenly you're trying to make it later, so the morning is the Zman, and we also try to delay it. That doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, no, yes, we do find such a thing. Because Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha, that the halacha is misbalol shel mincha v'yachar kach misbalol shel musafin. That really musaf is daven in the morning. After shacharis you daven musaf. That's what generally happens. But let's say you delay musaf to the time of mincha, so then you actually should delay musaf more, and you should daven mincha first and then daven musaf. And it's the same idea over here by the Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues and asks, Uvein Harbayim dechsiv gabe Ketores v'Neros. Now the Bein Harbayim, which is written by the Ketores and the Neros, lamali, so what is that for? And Rashi explains, Uvein Harbayim dechsiv gabe Ketores v'Neros lamali hoel uminei lo have a mashmalon Bein Harbayim mamish. Since really from the term Bein Harbayim it doesn't necessarily mean the afternoon. That's what we're saying over here from Karban Pesach. Umiboilan krach rini lefrushin. You need to have some other source from the psukim to explain that it really means in the afternoon towards evening. So therefore, what is the purpose of writing Bein Harbayim by Ketoris and Neiros? V'yoden further, Heishiv Rebbe Tachas ben Beseira, Rebbe, he responded on behalf of ben Beseira, L'divrei Rebbe Yoshua, according to Rebbe Yoshua, Loim Amrit b'shlosha aser she'in miksaso roy, Tomar barba aser she'miksaso roy. It's different by the 13th, where you can't bring even part of the 13th is not fit to bring the Karban Pesach, whereas on the 14th, part of the 14th is fit to bring the Karban Pesach, meaning to say, Rebbe responded to Rebbe Yoshua. Rebbe Yoshua said that if you bring the Karban Pesach shelo l'shmo on the morning of the 14th, so it is not disqualified because the morning of the 14th is not the Zman for the Karban Pesach. And again, Ben Beseira said, no, if you bring it shelo l'shmo on the morning of the 14th, it is disqualified. And Rebbe answered Rebbe Yoshua on behalf of Ben Beseira. He said, you can't compare the 13th to the morning of the 14th, because the 13th of the entire day is not the Zman of the Karban Pesach, but the 14th part of the day is the Zman for the Karban Pesach. That was the response on behalf of Ben Beseira. And so the Gemara says, via Misa, if it's true what Rav Oshia says, that the entire day of the 14th is the Zman of the Karban Pesach according to Ben Beseira, so what's Rebbe even saying? Rebbe's whole argument is that part of the day of the 14th is the Zman of the Karban Pesach. Kulo Roy, who he should have said the whole day of the 14th is the Zman of the Karban Pesach, meaning to say, it sounds like from Rebbe's response on behalf of Ben Beseira, that Ben Beseira was only saying that if you bring a Karban Pesach shelo l'shmo on the morning of the 14th, it's disqualified. But he was not saying that if you bring a Karban Pesach on the morning of the 14th l'shmo, that would be a kosher carbon, because no, in the morning of the 14th is not exactly the proper Zman, but since the 14th in general is the Zman of the Karban Pesach, so therefore in terms of disqualification, if you bring it shelo l'shmo on the morning of the 14th, it's disqualified. That's what it seems from what Rebbe is saying as well. And so the Gemara now has two reasons to reject Reb Oshia. First, the statement of Rebbe that we just brought, and again, Bein Harbayim seems to mean the afternoon. It seems to mean towards evening, because otherwise, what's the purpose of even writing Bein Harbayim by Ketoris and by the Neiros? And so the Gemara says, Elo Amar Reb Yochanan, rather Reb Yochanan says a different understanding of Ben Beseira. Posel Hoya Ben Beseira bepesach sheshachtu be'arba asar shachar is Bein Lishmo, Bein Shalo Lishmo. Ben Beseira would say that a Karban Pesach that is slaughtered on the 14th in the morning, it doesn't matter how you slaughter it. If you slaughter it lishmo, it's not going to be kosher as a Karban Pesach, because that's not the Zman of the Karban Pesach. And if you slaughter it shelo lishmo, it's going to be disqualified, because it's considered enough of the Zman of the Karban Pesach for that disqualification of shelo lishmo. Hoelu miksaso roy, since part of it is fit on part of the 14th to bring the Karban Pesach, so the morning of the 14th for the Karban Pesach is a complete disqualification. It doesn't matter how you bring the Karban Pesach. If you bring it lishmo, it's no good, because again, it's not really the Zman. And if you bring it shelo lishmo, since it's partially the Zman, it is also disqualified. And the Gemara continues, Megadef bo Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo, he ridiculed this explanation of Rabbi Yochanan that according to Ben Beseira, the Karban Pesach is always possible on the morning of the 14th, because imkain, if so, Pesach kosher leBen Beseira hechi mashkachas la. How are you ever going to be able to bring a kosher Karban Pesach? Because ida afresheho idna, because if you're going to separate it right now, dichoy mei karuhu, so that's a situation where it is pushed off from the outset. What he means to say is that let's say you sanctify, you consecrate the animal on the morning of the 14th. You're going to consecrate the animal and you won't be able to bring it immediately. That's called dichoy. That means it's an animal that is hektish to be a carbon, but cannot be brought as a carbon. That's dichoy meikara. It's going to be pushed off from the outset, and it should be a puzzle carbon. V'idaf reshinu me'esmol. Now, if you're going to separate it from, let's say, yesterday, where really technically you could bring it on the day before, on the 13th, because you could bring it as a shlomim at that point in time, but still, nira v'nirchu, that would be nira. You're able to theoretically bring it as a carbon, but then when the morning of the 14th comes, it's nidcha, it's pushed off, and again it should be a problem, and that should be a disqualification. So this whole explanation would end up disqualifying all Karban Pesach. And the Gemara continues and says, Elo Amar Rabbi Avo, rather Rabbi Avo says, Tehei lachar chatzos, we have a simple answer, just consecrate it after chatzos, already the Zman, meaning after chatzos on the 14th of Pesach, that is definitely the Zman of the Karban Pesach, and then it will never be pushed off. The Gemara continues, Abaye Amar Abaye says, Afilu tema mitzafra. You can even say that you consecrate the Karban Pesach on the morning of the 14th, even though it's completely not a time when you can bring that animal as a carbon, but ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. We don't call it mechusar zman. It's not lacking in time if it's the very same day. As long as the very same day you can bring it, that's not called being pushed off. It's possible to bring it that day, even though you'll have to wait a few hours until the afternoon. Rav Papa Amar Rav Papa says, Afilu tema meyorsi. You can even say that the night before you can consecrate consecrate the animal. For the same basic idea, Laila ain't mechusar zman. The night is not mechusar zman. Just because you have to wait for the next day, that's not called mechusar zman. The Tani Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Yishmael taught, Leil Shmini nichnas ladir lesaser. On the night of the 8th, meaning to say, an animal when it's 8 days old, that's really when it's fit to be a korban. So let's say the night right before that already, then it could enter in the pen for the purpose of tithing. Uchad Rav Aftoriki, like Rav Aftoriki says, the Rabbi Aftoriki Rami Ksiv, because Rabbi Aftoriki, he has a contradiction in the Psukim as follows. Rami, he has the following contradiction. Ksiv, it's written in the pasuk V'haya Shivas Yomim Tachasimo. It says it's 7 days with its mother, not yet fit to be a korban. Halayla Chazi, that sounds like at the nighttime already, it's going to be fit to be a korban. But then it's also written Umiyom Hashmini V'hala Yeratza, that it's fit, it's going to be accepted as a korban only from the day, from the 8th day and onward. Halayla Lo Chazi, that sounds like the night it's not fit. Haketzad, how so? Laila L'Kedusha, by the night already you can consecrate the animal, but V'yom L'Harza, but in the daytime is when it's accepted as a korban, and so you see that Laila is not considered mechusar zman. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Reb Zeira le Rabbi Avo, Reb Zeira said to Rabbi Avo, Leima kasav Rabbi Yochanan, let us say that Rabbi Yochanan holds, Baalei Chayim nidachin, that animals, they can be pushed off. Rashi explains, Leima kasav Rabbi Yochanan, midi itzrich lon l'shanuya yalibe, b'mafresh la'achar chatzos, from the fact that we needed to answer, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that you're separating the animal after chatzos, lo shmiya lach minei baalei chayim nidachin, because if we hadn't heard from Rabbi Yochanan that animals can be pushed off, roy lahafrish liolam, then really we should be able to separate the animal at any time. The dilma ein dichoy ela b'shchutin, because maybe the concept of dichoy only takes place by an animal that is slaughtered. Could go in meis hamishtalech yishafech adam b'Meseches Yuma, like a case we have in Meseches Yuma, that's talking about where you have the 2 goats for Yom Kippur. So if the goat which is sent away, if that one dies, the blood of the other goat has to be poured out. So again, that's talking about where the animal was already slaughtered. Maybe there's only dichoy in that situation. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, yes, Rabbi Yochanan really does hold that Baalei Chaim can be pushed off. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says, Behema shel shnei shutfin, let's say you have an animal that belongs to 2 partners. Hikdish chetzia, let's say half of it was consecrated by one of the partners. V'chazar v'loka chetzia, and then he goes ahead and he buys the other half. V'hikdish, and he consecrates the other half of the animal. Kedusha ve'ena kreva, the halach is, it is consecrated, but it cannot be offered. V'osa tmura, and also, let's say a person would try to exchange that animal for another animal, so the second animal would become a tmura, it would have that kedusha, utmurasa kayotzeba, and the tmura, the exchange animal, that animal will be similar to the first animal in that it is not able to be offered as a korban. Ushma mina tlos, and we see from here 3 ideas. Shma mina baalei chayim nidachin, we see that animals are pushed off. Ushma mina dichoy meikar havadicha, we see if it's pushed off from the outset, that also is pushed off. Ushma mina, and we see from here, and Rashi explains, hikdish chetzia echad mehem, meaning one of the partners consecrates the animal. V'yosa tmura, and that animal can make tmura deha'ena de shutfin. The idea over here is this no longer belongs to shutfin. It doesn't belong to partners. There's no concept of tmura by shutfin, but over here it's no longer owned in partnership. V'yeina kraven, you can't bring the animal as a korban. Ho'alu v'tchilas hakdesha, the reason is, since in the beginning of consecrating the animal, lo nir l'hakrev, you weren't able to bring it. The chetzi ha'isa chulin, because half of it was chulin, half of it was not consecrated. V'dichoy meikaruhu, that's exactly a case where it's pushed off from the outset. Hilkach eina kreva, therefore it cannot be offered as a korban. Eina kreva od, it can no longer be offered as a korban. V'tirin, it's left to graze. V'lochin b'dameh acheres, and you're going to use the money to buy another one. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis.